Hey everyone, welcome back to Count Me In. I'm Adam Larson, and today's episode is one you don't want to miss. I had the pleasure of sitting down with DeTraglia, Chief Auditor at Sabre Corporation. And let me tell you, she brings an infectious energy and a wealth of insightful stories to the table. We talk about what it means to be a united leader and why collaboration is the driving force of her leadership style. Anne shares a refreshingly honest journey. From her early days as a first in her family to go to college, all the way to navigating a fast paced world of auditing. We dig into why feedback isn't just necessary, it's a gift, and how learning to give and receive it with trust and a little bit of tact can change the game for you and your team. So, if you're ready to rethink your approach to leadership, embrace vulnerability, and build a culture where feedback helps everyone grow, you're in for some practical wisdom and plenty of laughs. So, grab your headphones and let's dive into this inspiring conversation. And thank you so much for being on Count Me. And I'm so excited to have you here. And when I met you in Phoenix, we talked a little bit about leadership, and I wanted to kind of continue that conversation. And I know you're very passionate and you're very excited, and I am so excited to be talking about you. And one of the things that you mentioned to me was being a united leader. And I wanted to kind of ask you, what does that mean? Because when somebody hears that, they're probably like, well, I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, so the company I work for, Sabre Corporation, like most organizations, we have values. And one of our values, and it's the value that resonates with me the most, is being united. And it really speaks to collaborating, right? And working together toward a common goal. And that is, for me, it speaks to my learning style. It speaks to how I like to achieve goals at work. Like I like getting together with people and working on things as a group. I don't generally like to go off on my own, although I will do that. But I typically like to get in a room with people and brainstorm and think about how we can do things differently or how we're going to get after a certain initiative, how we're going to achieve a goal. So to me, like being united is that it's really around collaborating.
hmm Well, because a lot of times when you talk about leadership, especially the higher up you go, the more lonely it gets. And so I like this idea of this united leadership where it's like, hey, I might be up here, but we're all in this together.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I'm going to tell you, I found out today that a colleague, a friend of mine, was laid off. And I said to my husband, the higher up you go, the closer, like, if you think of yourself as a tree, the higher up you go, the closer you are to that lightning strike. But also, the higher up you go, the bigger your branches are, and the more shade you provide for the people around you, right? Like if you think
Yeah.
about, I think about like the Amazon rainforest, right? Those big trees and the not just the shade that they provide, but that ecosystem. And if you take, like what's weighing heavy on my heart today because of my friend. And hey, it's business. I've been on the receiving end of a severance package 3 times. It happens, right?
Yeah.
But if you take that, what happened there and you continue on this metaphor, even those trees that, fall, they're still part of the ecosystem and they're still keeping, things in the rainforest alive around them, right? Like we are all
hmm
part of helping people on their journey. We're still part of that broader leadership. I'm going to say ecosystem again, but that's what I mean by it, right?
Yeah.
Like you can look at things from that negative perspective, but you can also look at them from the perspective of, the higher up you go, the lonelier it can be, but also you have to look at it from the perspective of the higher up you go, the more responsibility you have and the more influence you have and the more positivity you can bring to the people around you. And that's really important, I think.
Yeah. And then it just makes me think as somebody's advancing in their career and their branches are getting larger and they're creating more
Yeah.
shade, that requires them to have more skills and new skills that they need to adopt. And how did you approach that in your career as you were going up the ranks, you had to kind of take new skills and suddenly you're a colleague and the next thing you know, you're that person's boss or it's a weird dynamic as you're advancing in your career.
Yeah. It's funny. I never intended on becoming an auditor. It's like, so here's how this all worked out. Like, I like first in my family to go to college, right? Didn't have any earthly idea what I wanted to do. I was pretty good at Spanish. So it was like, what do you want to study? I'll study Spanish. You know, that's what I put down. So I started going down that path. And I grew up in Chicago. So I went to Illinois State University. And Illinois State University historically is a teaching school. And I'm going to answer this question, but I'm going to like take you on a journey with me.
All right.
So ISU, Illinois State University, because I know there's a lot of ISUs out there. I've learned that from living all over this great country of ours.
Mhm.
And so ISU, big teaching school, their motto is gladly would he learn and gladly teach. And in fact, ISU is in a town called Normal, Illinois. And for those who don't know this, normal schools back in the day were teaching schools. And that's how Normal, Illinois became known as Normal, Illinois. It was because ISU was a normal school, it was a teaching school. Anyway, probably a lot of students from Illinois State didn't even know that. So now they know if they're listening to this podcast. So I'm at ISU and I'm, getting a degree in Spanish literature and linguistics. And I like I don't have any earthly idea what I'm going to do with this degree. I'm just kind of like living my life, getting a degree. Like life is sort of happening to me. I'm not
Mhm.
sort of in control of where I'm going, right? And getting good grades, doing my thing. And I have an advisor, and I decide I don't really want to teach because I came from a family that struggled financially, right? Like we weren't in poverty, but we weren't necessarily not in poverty, if that makes sense, right? And I didn't want to live that way. And I knew that if I went into teaching, I wasn't necessarily going to make a lot of money. And I wanted to make a lot of money. That was sort of my mission. So I decided I'm not going to go into the teaching program. And so I decided I was going to get a master's degree and it was going to be in linguistics. And I applied to a couple really good schools. One was the Monterey School of Linguistics in California, and one was in Middlebury, Vermont. It was like, did you want to ski or did you want to surf? I don't know. That's I got into both schools, both very good
Nice.
programs. And my college advisor sat me down and she said to me, "You need to get your MBA. I don't know what you're doing, but you need to get your MBA. You speak Spanish and a little bit of French. Let me tell you something, sister. There are a lot of people who speak a lot of Romance languages. You need to speak like Farsi. You need to speak Chinese, like Mandarin, right? Like
Okay.
you are not going to be competitive in this field. Get a hold of yourself, get it together, and go get your MBA." And I thought, okay. First time in my life anyone had given me some real practical advice. And
Yeah.
it was sort of a switch for me. Like you need to stop letting life happen to you, and you need to start getting into the driver's seat.
Mhm.
So I ended up attending a really great program at a school in Arizona called Thunderbird, the American Graduate School of International Management, which at the time was the number one international business school in the world. And so I can't even believe I got into school there, to tell you the truth. And so I got into the program, ended up getting my MBA. Um, it was great. It was a life changing experience. Got out of there and got into a management training program. Still didn't really like know what I wanted to do, just knew I had my MBA and I was going to go do something in business.
Yeah.
So still kind of in that like, well, what do I do with this business degree? And Arthur Andersen, before they imploded, before Enron and all of that, they had asked me to go and do tax work for them in Argentina, and I decided that wasn't for me. I knew that I that definitely did not want to get involved in taxes. Thank God for that. And I ended up in a management training program with a company that was not well known at the time, but was fast growing. And I knew about this company because I did financial statement analysis class program where I tried to take over the company. This was like a thing that I did, and it was called the Home Depot. So, like, nobody in my family knew about the Home Depot at the time. They were really big in the Southeast and had started to expand a little bit, I think, at the time on the West Coast, and they were expanding in the Northeast. And so the Home Depot said, you can get into this program and go wherever you want in the country. And at the time, I had this boyfriend who ultimately became my husband, and he got a job in Jersey. And so I said, you got stores in Jersey, I'll go there. And I ended up opening up some stores in New Jersey, learned a ton, still didn't know like what is going to happen when I graduate from this program.
Yeah.
And a guy came into the stores and was an auditor. And he was auditing the store. I had no idea what an auditor did. And he was going around doing all this auditing, and he was so smart. He knew how things were supposed to work. And so I kept following him around because, I'm like a little management trainee. And so I had been rotating around the store learning things. But now this guy actually knew how things were supposed to work. And now this gets to the answer to your question. It was the first time in my life where it was like auditors know how things work. And I started to really home in on, I want to know how things work. And I became this guy's worst nightmare because I was like the shadow. And he was in the store only for 2 weeks. This is like a typical like auditors back in the day. This is pre Sarbanes-Oxley, like checklist kind of auditing. And I just thought this guy's great. He was teaching everybody how to run the store properly. Because Home Depot was expanding so quickly, that was kind of the auditor's mission. Like they were there to
Gotcha.
audit, for sure. Like if things were off the rails, like you were not going to get a great audit, and you had to fix stuff. Like for sure, there was still the audit discipline, but they were also teaching you, everybody in the store, like teaching you how to do things correctly. So they had an audit closing meeting, which is normal. And it happened to be that the head of audit, who would attend, a sample of, look at me with my audit terminology still, they would go to a select number of audit closing meetings a year. And the head of audit, this guy, Ken, he came to that particular closing meeting. And I was in the meeting and I was asking all these questions. And the auditor told this guy, this woman has not left me alone for the entire audit. She is like all over me. And he was really impressed. So he came to me and he said, hey, I have an opening in Boston. And this is no offense to anyone listening who is from New Jersey, but I did not like New Jersey. I did not want to live there any longer. I had been there for 2 years. I had never been to Boston. I was a Chicago girl. And my ex-husband, who I was living, well, he wasn't my ex-husband then, but we were about to get married. And he didn't like New Jersey either. And he didn't like boss. He like it was funny. Anyway, I said, "Hey, do you want to move to Boston?" And he said, "Yeah, let's go." And so we got up, got married, went on our honeymoon, and moved to Boston. And I became an auditor. And I started learning all these new skills. And auditing through the course of my career has taught me so many new things. Like I've learned all these new things about risk. I've learned about like fraud. I've learned all these new things about like just strategy and like how you do SWOT analysis. And I've learned all these new things about accounting that I never learned, tax. I hate tax still, but I learned a lot of new things about tax that I would have learned. Like it's just all these new things. And so if it weren't for being an auditor, I don't know that I would have ever gotten into the roles I've been in and learned all these new things.
Interesting.
So I tell people I've been an auditor for 30 years, but I can't tell you how many times I've been in an interview process where someone will say, I see you're interviewing to be like a chief auditor, but I see all you've done is risk management. And it's like, what? So like the risk management stuff like jumps off the page. But that is what chief auditors do. So it's kind of funny how people will read things in their own different way. Anyway, there's a really long-winded way of saying I have always taken the opportunity to learn new things within the context of my role. And I think that's what anyone should do, whether you're an accountant or a finance professional, and not to let your role or your wherever you are in life, let it happen to you, but to go out and take those opportunities to learn new things.
Yeah. I think that's amazing advice. One thing that, when you were saying that counselor sat you down and said, "Well, if you're not doing these things, then you shouldn't go this way. You should go this route." Like that's a moment of feedback that not everybody's really ready to hear sometimes. And so maybe we could talk, because I know that feedback is really important to you and you love giving good feedback and receiving feedback. And maybe we could talk a little bit about, like, how's that played a bit of pivotal role for you? And then we can kind of go from there.
Wow. So I love getting feedback and I certainly love giving feedback too. And I think there's a couple directions here, but like I will tell you that I will ask for feedback frequently from my team, from peers, from my leader, and people have a hard time giving feedback because feedback has this like negative connotation. And I had a career coach who she has this perspective and she goes, "Look, feedback is just like it's neutral. Feedback is just words. It is what you decide to do with the feedback that gives it power." And I'm going to say that again. It is what you do with the feedback that gives it the power, right? And people forget that. Too often we take feedback and we get way too wrapped up in it and overanalyze it and get just too crazy around the
Hmm.
feedback that's given to us, right? Like, hey, Anne, you were in that meeting and you know, you went on too long and you could have been more concise. And like I can walk away with that feedback and say, that person doesn't know what they're talking about and I needed to give that level of detail and they don't understand. Wah, 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 and just be really defensive about it. Or I could walk away and say, huh, there's a nugget of truth in there. It probably did go on a little bit longer than it needed to. Let me take that feedback away and think about the next time I go in to a meeting. Is there a way for me to be a little bit more brief? Right? Can I have, um, can I can I be brief, be brilliant, be gone? Right? Like, is
Yeah.
there a way for me to take a nugget of truth from there and not have it be some personal attack, right? Like, feedback doesn't have to be this terrible thing that happens to you. And so I'll tell you a couple stories here. I had the good fortune to have a gentleman who worked for me, and I'm still very good friends with this person to this day, who ended up working for me. I was sort of at a point in my career where I was a little stuck. It wasn't like I wasn't doing well. I was just not sort of progressing. Just kind of there. I was at that director level. So
Yeah.
like how you kind of move up and you finally become a manager, you're managing people. Yay, it's so great. Um, and then you move into a director role. So you've got managers working for you who are managing people. And that is a very different element in your leadership journey. It's, different way. It's a different form of leadership, right? Than having a team of maybe 3 to 6 people that you're managing. That's typically how it starts for most people. And now you've got a couple, 2, 3 managers that you're leading who are leading bodies of work. And I was kind of stuck in that director level for a long time. And I just couldn't break out of that director role and move into a senior director or a managing director role in the various companies I was in. And this gentleman who worked for me started to give me upward feedback. And prior to that time, I did feel like feedback I was getting was a personal attack. Because prior to that, all the feedback I had ever received was, "And you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and you're walking on water, and like you can do no wrong," right? So if you've never received any kind of constructive feedback until that point, if you're getting any kind of constructive feedback, you're just going to take it like it's a personal attack. Like you don't
Yeah.
know how to receive it and how to act on it appropriately, right? And this gentleman worked for me, and he started to frame it up for me in such a way where it was really constructive and I could receive it and act on it. And it didn't feel like it was a personal attack. It was stuff like, "Hey, Anne, when you do this, it impacts the team in this way, and then the work suffers because of this." Right? So he could draw like an action that I was doing. It wasn't like, "Hey, Anne, you're mean to the team, and so this happens." Right? It was based in facts. It was like, "Hey, Anne, when you do this," whatever it was, like something based in fact, like you're showing up late to a meeting, or you're
Yeah.
not reviewing on time, you're doing this thing, then this is the impact it has on the team. And then here's the impact it has on the work. And then all of a sudden, I started to realize, okay, I get what that feedback is now. Like, I get what I'm doing, how I get how I'm showing up, and like what that impact is and what's wrong there. And I also started to understand, up until that point, I was in this space of I have to know everything. I have to be the person who has all the knowledge and is telling everybody what to do all the time, because that's like where I had been successful, right? Like
Yeah.
as a independent contributor, as a young manager, I was really successful because I was so smart. Like remember I was telling you at Home Depot as an auditor, it was like the auditors know how everything works. They're telling everything how everything works. They're the smartest people. They went out and taught everybody. I was like the source of knowledge. That was why I was so good.
Hmm.
And then as I got further along, you just can't possibly know everything. And so it was becoming a detriment to me because I didn't know everything. And I started to realize I had to depend on these managers. They knew things that I didn't know, and I had to depend on them. And it was a turning point in my career, because if it hadn't been for that manager giving me that feedback, like, "We are here. We have it. You have to trust us
Yeah.
because you are going to kill us with like you needing to know everything and direct everything. You're going to kill us. You're going to put everything behind schedule and we're never going to get anything done. And it was a big turning point for me. And
Yeah.
it was finally then when I started to let go and I started to trust that, like, ah, now the team's like set off and they were free. Now I will tell you, I am very much that manager today, and that sometimes stresses people out. Director who works for me today, she will say, "Anne, you are a vision caster." And some people need a little bit more of a prescriptive approach. So you do have to find a balance. You do have to find a balance, but I am appreciative that she gives me that feedback. So like now
Yeah.
I know sometimes people do need a little bit more direction and a little bit more like, okay, I get it. You aren't going to micromanage me, but maybe you could micromanage me a little. Sometimes there's that too. But I do think feedback just requires a lot of trust over time.
It really does because it can make you uncomfortable depending how the person says it. Like you were saying, like the gentleman you're working for or who was working for you, he presented it in a way that you could receive it. And a lot of times when somebody gives something to you, it does feel very accusatory, attacking, especially if everybody's saying, "You're the greatest thing, you're awesome." And then suddenly, well, actually, this last week you did this. And you're like, oh, me? How could I do such a thing? And it's like this like dramatic, your ego is hurt and it's all down. So maybe we could talk a little bit, maybe some strategies that people can think about to kind of bridge that gap because you
Yeah.
want, like, we should be able to receive feedback, be able to give feedback. And you've already talked a little bit about like ways to give good feedback, but how do we bridge that gap so that we're not so hurt when that first like negative, like quote unquote negative, because it's not really negative. It's just something that we need to work on.
Yeah. Like it's the person receiving it or the person giving it.
Well, as the person, like maybe we could start with the person receiving it. Like when you get that feedback and you're like, me, I would never. But then actually listening and saying, well, actually, there is some truth there.
Yeah. I will tell you, my career coach, Leslie, she'll say, just get over yourself. I mean, like, she's very direct, but also compassionate. There's always when someone is giving you feedback, and I know it's trite to say this, but it is true. Feedback is a gift. Like if someone is coming to you and they're giving you feedback, they're not doing it to be mean.
No.
They're trying to help you. I mean, you have to like just root yourself in that, right? Like root yourself in that. They're trying to help. I mean, and if you can't, if you cannot believe that, you've got to do some soul searching. Like seriously, because no one is coming to you giving you feedback with like a dagger in their hand. That is not why they're doing it. Because truly, if they didn't like you, they wouldn't bother.
Mm.
So you just got to start with that premise. Like the reason why they're giving it to you is because they do care. They're trying to help. And then the next piece of it is, okay, there has to be something here within this feedback that like, okay, what in here? There's a nugget in here that I can use. There's something I can act on, right? I used to say there's three things that you can do with feedback. One is I can accept it and I can say, I don't, this feedback has been given to me and I'm accepting it and I'm saying, I want to act on this and address it, right? Like what my colleague Andre did for me. The second one is I'm accepting this feedback to be true and I don't really care. I'm not going to really act on it, which you can do. I mean, it is an
Hmm.
option. I don't think that that's wise. I think there is always something that you can act on in there. And then the third option is I don't believe this feedback to be true. I think this person is crazy. They're way off base. And so obviously I'm not going to act on it. And the reason why I say I don't usually dispense that advice anymore in terms of these are three things you can do with feedback is because my career coach has convinced me there is always something in feedback that you can act on.
Even if it's just a little bit of truth.
Yeah, there is always something in there. You got to find a little nugget in there that you can act on.
One thing you said that earlier that I wanted to ask you about is, people have a lot hard time giving feedback. How do we get better at giving feedback, especially in a constructive way? Because especially when there's like, let's say a colleague comes to me and say, "Hey, you've been working with so and so, and I'm their manager. Can you just give me some like feedback on their doing?" And your immediate reaction is, "Oh, I better give all the cool things they're doing," as opposed to, "Well, here's some things that like constructive things they can work on because I don't want to mess up that person's review. I don't want to like there's all these other factors that come into involve before we give that feedback."
Yeah. So I love a good framework. So the best framework for giving feedback, in my opinion, is to take a fact, this happened, and this is the impact, and you give it, right? So I'll tell you,
That seems too simple.
I know, but that is how you do it, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I will tell you, I'm the chief auditor, so I report to the board, but, administratively, I report to the CFO. And I give feedback to everybody. I do it all the time. And recently, it was a few months ago, CFO, had his leadership team meeting, which I'm a part of, and he was talking about a process for backfilling open slots. And everybody who walked away from that meeting believed that the process was going to work in a certain way. And we went into the next leadership team meeting, and the process definitely wasn't working in the way any of us thought it was going to work. I mean, like during the meeting, we're all like DMing each other. Is that really what we all talked about? Because this is not what we all talked about, right? I mean, we're all DMing each other. So, do you think anybody on that leadership team was going to go to the CFO and say, this process does not match what we talked about?
Probably not.
No. And so I went to our HR partner who was also in the room and I said, I don't think that process was matching what we talked about. Do you agree? And she said, no, that's totally not matching what we talked about. Are you going to talk to the CFO? Oh, no, I'm not talking to the CFO. Why is no one going to talk to the? So I had a one-on-one with him. I don't know, whatever, however many days later. And so I said, hey, Mike, 2 weeks ago, when we talked about the process, it was my understanding that it was going to work this way. And he said, why would you think that? And I said, well, because that is how I understood it. And I will tell you, that is how several other people on the leadership team understood it as well, because I asked several other people and they said, yes, that's what I thought. And he was like, no, I would never do it that way, blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'm telling you that we all understood it to be this way. So what I am saying is the way you presented it it was not received by everyone else in the way you intended.
Yeah.
So what you need to do is drive clarity at the next meeting so that we all better understand what your intention is. Because the way you presented it was received by us in a very different way. So he came in guns a-blazing at the next meeting. I don't know why everybody misunderstood it. But at least we all had an improved understanding. And it was fine. And he needed to hear that feedback that the way he had given the information was not well understood by anyone in that room, right? Because without that clarity, everybody was walking around like the CFO is just changing the rules. And that wasn't what happened. It was just a lack of clear communication, like just go have a conversation. I don't know why people don't want to have conversations with people. Like, it's just go have a conversation. It's not a big deal. The other thing I will say is, we're having mid-year performance conversations right now, and I will always ask my team, give me some names of people who you've been working with, who you think would have constructive feedback for you. And then I will email those folks and I will give them very specific questions, not like, hey, what feedback do you have about Angela? What feedback do you have about Lucia? Like, I want them to give me, like, I will say, hey, one of our values is being ambitious. And then I will give them very specific questions that relate to that value for that person within the context of the type of work that they're doing with that individual. So, like, I'm trying to drive to a
Yeah.
certain level of detail around the feedback. Now, have I ever gotten any constructive feedback from someone? No. It's always like, "Oh my goodness, they're all that in a bag of chips," which is great. And I always give them, my team will always get anonymized, feedback as part of their performance review as sort of a supplementary appendix to their performance review because I think it's good for them to have that. But people really are terrible at being able to give any kind of constructive feedback to a peer
Yeah.
when they know it's going to be anonymized. It's just ridiculous. We do a very bad job at teaching people how to do this effectively, I think.
Yeah. And I think it goes back like I like that example you gave where you were saying that you give them like a here's a specific thing you can answer to help with that feedback. But I agree it is still really difficult to get that even if you do the even if you have that exact, that exact question, giving us a constructive feedback thing. Because I don't know if it's we're just all not thinking in that way, or maybe that thing happened and it's in the past and you're so far beyond it that you don't even remember what it is.
Yeah, well, and also because, like, how many of us are, like, going through our day, and I'm guilty of this as well, not being mindful
Hmm.
of what's happening in
Yeah.
the moment, right? Like, thinking about, like, what have I been doing today, and who have I been engaging with today, and, like, what feedback would I have for those people? We all forget, like, as soon as the day is over, like, what the heck happened today? It's just hard to remember.
Is that a way? Is because sometimes like when I've like I think back to different like performance reviews I've gotten, and like the only negative thing was that one negative thing that happened like a week ago because it was the most recent thing,
Yeah.
and like, or should we be like keeping a record of things that we do when we work with people so that we can be ready for feedback at any time? Like, what are there different methods that you do when you're trying to like remember the things that have happened throughout the year?
Oh, yeah, I do that. I have 2 directories. One of them is in Outlook, and it's
Okay.
it's just called hiring performance, and then it has subdirectories. So anytime something comes through, positive, negative, neutral, whatever, but I think it's going to be worth mentioning for a colleague, for a direct report, a peer, whatever, I toss it into that file. Like if it's an email or something like that, I'll just go into my Outlook directory. And then I have something on my local drive, and things will go in there throughout the year. And I keep stuff in there. And I'm always surprised then when it comes time for performance review time, I'll go back and look and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that thing." So and then you just have like a catalog of stuff that's there and I just have it at the ready. So that's what I do. I keep things as a running tally of things that have gone on throughout the year that I know I had wanted to remember about
Hmm.
that person, for that person, and almost always it's good stuff. We have a
Yeah.
program at Sabre called Say Thanks, and so people will do a lot of say thanks for others, and so I can go into the dashboard and I can see who got say thanks and what was it for, and that's nice too, to be able to go in and look, especially if, like, someone outside of our function was saying thanks to a member of the function. That's helpful.
Yeah. I mean, that's great because you've created that culture of kind of giving that feedback, even because saying thanks is a form of feedback. Saying thank you for the awesome work you, that's a feedback to that
Yeah.
person. And creating that culture seems really important to kind of let this be successful.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So to give feedback and to receive feedback, there needs to be that kind of a level of vulnerability, which is difficult to have, especially when you have to have authority, you have to have accountability. There's all these other aspects you have to have. So how have you been able to balance those two?
Authority and vulnerability.
Yeah.
I'm not an engineer, so maybe I'm going to screw this up. Is it the fulcrum that's in the middle of there?
Geez.
Is
I feel like I
trust?
should know that too. Yeah.
I feel like trust is the fulcrum in between
That
those two.
sounds right.
Yeah, because you can look, authority is like something that exists on an org chart, right? Like you can't take that with you, you know? But vulnerability is something I think over time people experience with you and they know that you have it or they know that you don't, right? Like people can see, I think pretty quickly if you're guarded. People can see pretty quickly if you are disingenuous. People can see pretty quickly if you are, just unethical, not a, yeah, you're that kind of person. I think people know they
Yeah.
can suss it out. Um, and if you're if you are coming at people, and I've worked for someone like this, who really over revved, sorry, on their positional power over me, over others, and really didn't have that personal influence to serve in the organization effectively, you know?
Yeah.
Like they were,
Yeah.
interestingly, they were charismatic to a certain degree. But I can tell you right now, if they ever left the organization where they are, I don't know a whole heck of a lot of people who would stand up and fight for them, right?
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I've
Just
seen it.
yeah. Come on. Everybody listen to this podcast. We all know somebody like that. We've all worked with somebody like that. Thankfully, you don't meet many people like that in your career. Um, I haven't met many people like that in my career. Most people I work with are really good, salt of the earth people, knock on wood. I don't know if that knock came through. These microphones, they filter out everything.
I heard the knock, so we'll hopefully the recording will hear the knock, but I like that. This is like you've got my mind going so many different directions, and we can't talk for hours upon hours because that would just be a really long podcast, and
I know.
we have other things to do. But I really appreciate that, like that like trust is the kind of the linchpin in like vulnerability and authority, because you have to trust that, hey, in this moment I'm telling you what to do because this is what needs to happen, and then the next moment, hey, thanks, like I have this feedback, or we have this vulnerable moment, that those things can happen in the same day, and that's okay. And it's okay to kind of open yourself and let your ego go a little bit, like not saying that like put yourself down, but hey, it's okay to kind of be open and be open for vulnerability, be open for feedback, and receive that with an open mind, regardless of how the person says it. Because we could probably go on for another hour talking about the best ways to give feedback and how to do those things. But regardless of how someone gives feedback, you're going to get feedback throughout your life. It's your choice to decide how you're going to take it.
Yeah. And like think about like how do you like get feedback in your home environment? How do you give feedback in your home environment? Right? Because some of this
Yeah.
is tied up with like emotional intelligence,
Hmm.
right? Like how many of us, we've all done it. We avoid having a difficult conversation So we just don't have it. Like that elephant is in the room and we're all ignoring that elephant. We're just letting it sit there, hoping it'll go away. It's never going to go away. Right. And that's just such low EQ. I mean, like, because you do have to just bring it up. Right.
Hmm.
I mean, like the example that I was giving, it was such a silly example with my CFO. Like
Yeah.
everybody would have just like let that go and we would have been like, all right, whatever, the process is different. Everybody would have been annoyed. But to me, I felt like, well, no, like the CFO needs to know everybody is misaligned with what your intention was. You should know that. Like, let's all get on the same page here, right? So I think that's just a gift that you give to someone, right? Like, don't avoid having the conversation, whether you're in the workplace or whether you're at home. The other thing is too, like, truthfulness. This is, I forget who said this, so I apologize. I can't remember. But like, truthfulness without tact,
Mm.
that's, yeah. I mean, truthfulness is feedback, but like be nice about it,
Hmm.
right?
Don't be
Yeah,
mean.
right. Like, yeah, their baby's
Yeah.
ugly, but you don't tell them, hey, your baby's ugly. Like, you can be nice about it, right? Like, you don't need to say it. Truthfulness without tact, that's low EQ. Like, so
Hmm.
you gotta have some high EQ when you're delivering feedback. You gotta say it in a way that it can be received effectively. So that's important. We're not walking around trying to destroy people here. Like you gotta talk to people in a way that is mature. You don't want you don't want to like destroy someone's life here, right? Like, hey, I'll give you one last story. I have someone on my team who we put into a role that had never existed before. And this individual, I felt like they could do this. It was just going to take them time. And we had mocked up a job description. And, what do you think about the job description? Yep, looks good, looks good. And they just weren't getting it. They weren't getting it. They weren't getting it. I mean, we were like 6 months in, and I'm like, I just don't think this role is right for you. I don't think you're getting it. We kept going back and forth with feedback. It just wasn't landing, wasn't working. This person was frustrated. I was frustrated. Other people on the team were frustrated because this role was important. It was hitting, not just me, but other people on the team. And I finally, after like 6 months of feedback and it just wasn't landing, I found a different way to give this person feedback where I'm not joking. I used artificial intelligence. I ran the job description through AI and said, what does good look like for this job description? And it spat it out on the other end. And I gave it to the person. And I said, this is what good looks like. And this is what you're doing. And here's the difference. Right. And do you
Yeah.
know that actually worked?
Okay. You got to get creative.
Right? And that individual has, somewhat young children, like middle school age. And that individual is so funny. I was stressing with them, look, feedback is neutral. It's what you do with the feedback that matters. And that individual says that to their children, their middle school children all the time. Hey, the feedback is neutral. It's just what you're doing with it that matters. And that individual is highly successful today in their role. So
Yeah.
sometimes don't get frustrated with how you're delivering the feedback. Sometimes as a leader, you have to figure out a different way to deliver
Yeah.
it. So that matters too.
That does matter too. And try out feedback you get with your kids and see how it goes. And that's a
Yeah,
good one
yeah.
too.
But like use
Yeah.
EQ
Use
is
some EQ.
important.
Yeah. Try it out, but with some EQ for sure.
Truthfulness with tact.
Yes.
You can't say your baby's ugly. You got to like be a little bit nicer about it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I hope that the listeners of this podcast have been as encouraged as I've been. I hope that folks try to lead with courage and give feedback with courage and not be afraid the way you've been describing. And I just really appreciate you coming on and chatting with me today, Ann.
I love talking with you. This is so fun. Thank you for having me. It's great.
This has been Count Me In, IMA's podcast, providing you with the latest perspectives of thought leaders from the accounting and finance profession. If you like what you heard and you'd like to be counted in for more relevant accounting and finance education, visit IMA's website at www.imanet.org.